Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. Since it's an election season, almost all these topics are from the world of Indian polity. And I'll try and make all these topics simpler for you, but I can't help since the newspaper is dominated by polity-related news. But before we start, let's look at today's schedule. On the app, Chethan sir would be taking Conquer Prelims Crash Course, class number 7, dealing with international relations. And on this YouTube channel, 7:30 p.m. onwards, Shyam sir would be discussing another session on economy-based current affairs for those targeting Prelims 2024. Let's get started and look at topic number 1. NewsClick founder and editor has now been released, and the Supreme Court has said his arrest was illegal. Let's try and understand this newspaper article in great detail. NewsClick founder and editor, he was arrested last year, but what were the allegations against him? The allegation was that you are showing Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh as not parts of India. The allegation was that you are discrediting the government's efforts to control COVID-19 pandemic. The allegation was that you are taking money, receiving funds to carry on pro-China propaganda in India. The allegation was that you are funding the farmers' protests because the farmers protested against the 3 farm laws. And then NewsClick founder and editor, he was arrested under a very stringent Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA. But now the Supreme Court has declared that his arrest is illegal. Why? Because the Supreme Court looked at and considered the basis of a judgment last year in 2023 in a case known as Pankaj Bansal versus Union of India, 2023. But before we analyze this judgment, let's look at what sort of questions have been asked from this particular topic in the mains examination. This was the question asked in 2019 mains examination. The Indian government has recently strengthened the anti-terrorism laws by amending the UAPA of 1967 and the NIA Act. Now look at the second part. Analyze the changes in the context of prevailing security environment while discussing the scope and reasons for opposing the UAPA by human rights organizations. So whenever there is a law which is passed or enacted by the parliament, or changes have been made to a particular law, consider the arguments in favor of this law, consider the arguments against this law as well, because if you are asked to critically analyze that law, or a question such as this is asked in the examination, you have to consider both arguments in favor of this law as well as against this law. So keep an eye open, keep your eyes and ears open whenever you are looking at these important current affairs topics. Coming back to this topic, the Supreme Court has declared the arrest of NewsClick founder and editor as illegal, and the Supreme Court made the basis of Pankaj Bansal versus Union of India 2023 judgment. In this case, the Supreme Court had said, if the Enforcement Directorate is arresting somebody under the provisions of Prevention of Money Laundering Act, then inform the grounds of arrest. And these grounds of arrest you have to mention in writing. And since the grounds for arrest were not provided and furnished to the NewsClick founder, editor and his lawyer, the Supreme Court declared that this arrest is illegal and he was released. Now listen to me carefully. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act This law was enacted in the year 1967, and this law has been amended 7 times. Now you might argue, so why do we need to know how many times this law has been amended? In a particular prelims examination, the question was asked how many times, or the Office of Profit Act has been amended 3 times. So sometimes you have to know these factual details as well. This law initially targeted unlawful organizations. And which are these unlawful organizations? The central government can ban an unlawful organization. If you are a member of an unlawful organization, you can be arrested. If you are funding this unlawful organization, you can be arrested. If you are dealing with the funds of this unlawful organization, you can be arrested. But over a period of time, this law was expanded. The scope of this law was expanded to also include terrorist organizations. And significantly, when amendment was made to this law in 2019, according to this 2019 amendment, the central government can declare an individual as well as terrorist. So prior to these 2019 amendments, only the organization could have been declared as a terrorist organization or an unlawful organization. Now even an individual can be declared and designated as a terrorist. Those were significant changes made in 2019. Long story short, this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, it not only deals with unlawful acts, it also deals with terrorist acts. Now you might argue, what is the difference between an unlawful act and a terrorist act? Although both these terms have been used interchangeably. Unlawful act is if you are going against the unity, integrity and sovereignty of India, but through words. And whether these words are spoken or whether these words are written, it is an unlawful act and you can be arrested, you can be penalized. Now what is a terrorist act? Again, if you go against the unity, integrity and sovereignty of India, but this time through firearms, through ammunition, through landmines, through biological weapons, that would mean you are committing a terrorist act and you can be penalized under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This particular aspect, whether through words, whether these words are spoken or written, if you are going against the unity, integrity and sovereignty of India, this is similar to section 124 capital A, which dealt with sedition under Indian Penal Code. That is why human rights organizations used to say, if we already have UAPA of 1967, there is no need to have sedition. And now there is no such provision of sedition under the new Indian Penal Code. Clear? But the point is, under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the conditions for bail, the bar for getting a bail is very high. That means it's very difficult for an individual to get the bail if you're arrested under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. In 2019, the central government said, the bill talked about that we should punish not only unlawful organizations and ban them, not only terrorist organizations and ban them, we should also penalize those who are propagating the ideology of terrorism. This is where human rights organizations said that this term is so broad, is so vague, that even if you criticize the government, if you're honestly criticizing the government, if you are expressing dissent in a democracy, which is the live breath of a democracy, you could be arrested under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. That is why the human rights organizations, they were opposing Unlawful Activities Prevention Act amendments, saying now an individual can be declared as a terrorist, and the scope of this law is so broad that even an honest criticism of the government, even a dissenting voice against the government can be declared as an unlawful act or a terrorist act, and you could be booked for this. And now this NewsClick founder editor, I told you about the charges, the allegations against him, that you are showing Arunachal and Kashmir as not parts of India. that you're discrediting the efforts of the government against the COVID-19 pandemic, that you are funding the farmers' agitation, that you're receiving money from China to carry out pro-China propaganda in India. All these allegations were made. But listen to me carefully. When this founder editor was arrested, maybe he was informed of the grounds of his arrest, but his lawyer was not informed. And this is where we come across Article 22 of the Constitution. Article 22 says, and this is a fundamental right which comes into the picture after you have been arrested. Once you have been arrested, you have to be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours. And you should be, there is this right to be informed of the grounds of arrest. And the Supreme Court has said, you should not only inform the individual you are arresting, you have to inform his lawyer as well, so that he can set up the legal defense, so that he can apply for bail. And when this founder editor of NewsClick was arrested, maybe orally he was informed. And some would say that his lawyers were also informed, but on a WhatsApp call. In written format, the grounds of his arrest were not communicated to the NewsClick founder editor or his lawyer, which means the procedure established by law under Article 21 was not followed, and ultimately the Supreme Court said this is the ground for releasing this individual. You are released on bail. This arrest was illegal. And the Supreme Court said whatever applies to Prevention of Money Laundering Act will apply to UAPA as well. So now provisions under Money Laundering Act and the UAPA Act, the grounds for bail now, if the arrest is illegal, if you are not informed of the grounds of your arrest, that makes your entire arrest is illegal and you will be released. So what applies to Enforcement Directorate in cases involving PMLA will apply to the government in cases involving UAPA as well. So this is a significant judgment of the court and can be relevant for the examination. What you need to understand is what were the allegations against the NewsClick founder editor, how this individual was arrested, how the Supreme Court used Pankaj Bansal versus Union of India as the ground to release this individual, saying the arrest was illegal. Why it was illegal? Because the guarantees under Article 21, which says you have to follow the procedure established by law, which we have now understood in India to mean due process of law. Article 22 also has been violated, and that makes this arrest illegal, and this individual has been released. Clear? Let's look at something else. The case for election day as a holiday. Now let me correct this article. The starting lines: in a vibrant democracy such as India, the right to vote is not just a privilege, but also a fundamental duty enshrined in the Constitution. Fundamental duty, which comes under Part 4, capital A of the Constitution, which deals with Article 51, capital A, does not talk about duty. And that is why there is a criticism against this entire chapter of fundamental duties, saying important fundamental duties are missing. Duty to vote in the election is not a fundamental duty. Duty to practice family planning program is not a fundamental duty. Duty to pay taxes on time is not a fundamental duty. So duty to vote in the election is not a fundamental duty enshrined in the Constitution, and that is something that we need to correct in this article. But apart from that, what is the larger messaging of this article? Representation of the People Act 1951, which governs the conduct of elections in India, it talks about election holiday. That means on the day of the election, all the establishments in that state, in that constituency, they will have to provide paid holiday to the voters. And now the author is saying, if voting is not compulsory in India, because what we are witnessing today, it's an election season, voting is going on, but the voting percentage is less. lesser as compared to 2019 elections in most of the constituencies in India. There are exceptions, but in most of the constituencies, the voting percentage is less. And that is what we call voters' apathy. And this is where you might see in coming weeks, there will be another round of debate on the idea of compulsory voting, saying voting should be made compulsory. People should be coerced into voting. That's how we can increase the voters' percentages, voter turnout, and that will deepen democracy in India because there is voters' apathy in India. But be that as it may, if voting is not compulsory in India, why is it compulsory for employers to give paid holiday to the voters? And in any case, these voters may not go and exercise their right to vote, which is a constitutional right. So why force business establishments to give paid holiday to the individuals, while at the same time those individuals, they don't have the duty to vote? They may not vote. That is the principal point of this particular column. If we look at United States or if we look at other countries, their voting takes place normally on a weekend. Although in United States, there are some states which give paid holiday to its employees, but there are other states which do not. And this article says there is no data which can prove that those states which give paid holiday to their voters, in those states there is increase in the voter turnout. There is no correlation. But if in India, traditionally what we look at, if the election is conducted, if the polling is conducted on a weekend, or let's say it is conducted on Monday, or let's say it's conducted on Friday, then we see that the voters look at this period as an extended holiday, extended weekend, and they will go to a hill station, they will have their own policies and programs. They will not resort to voting because they will treat this day as a holiday and an extended weekend. That's another problem. But this column also highlights some other pressure groups, for example, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, NASSCOM, and these are the pressure groups in India. Pressure group is one of the topics in your governance paper. These are the organizations which also have been pushing in one way or the other that there should be no paid holiday. Or as Tamil Nadu government has done recently, it has equated this paid holiday with the voter turnout. In the sense, only those will be given or should be given paid holiday if you can prove that you have been to the polling booth, if you have voted. If you have voted, if you can prove it, then you should be provided with a paid holiday, otherwise no. Long story short, what this article is basically arguing for is that voting is an important duty, but then we see voters' apathy. Voters do not turn out in large numbers and vote. So there is no obligation on the voters to vote, but there is obligation on the employers, on the establishments to give paid holiday to these voters, regardless of whether they will vote or not. So what should we do in India? Should we follow the practice, for example, United States, where the voting should take place over a weekend so that you don't have to pay paid holiday to your employees? Or should we follow something like the Tamil Nadu suggestion that equate it with the voter turnout? If you have voted in the election, then you should be paid holiday. You should be given paid holiday, otherwise no. Or should we carry out election on a weekend so that the business establishments in India, they do not have to resort to paid holidays during the election season? That's the whole crux of this article, the case for election day as a holiday. Clear? Let's look at something else. Crime and time. Now listen to me carefully. Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, the Delhi Chief Minister, has now been released on interim bail. It's not a full-fledged bail, it's an interim bail. Why? Because you need to campaign in the elections. Now let's understand this newspaper column, this editorial in great detail. But listen to me carefully. Mr. Kejriwal, as the Chief Minister of Delhi, but he is not only the Delhi Chief Minister, he is also the convener of a national political party known as Aam Aadmi Party. a liquor policy was announced by the Delhi government headed by Chief Minister Mr. Kejriwal, and it was alleged that there is a scam. Private sector was included in this liquor policy. Maybe some bribe was given, and this bribe, close to 100 crores, was used by Aam Aadmi Party to contest elections in Goa. So basically those 100 crores of bribe, these are the proceeds of crime, and these proceeds of crime has been used by whom? By the Aam Aadmi Party to contest elections in Goa. These are not my allegations, these are the allegations of Enforcement Directorate, which is looking into this issue under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, PMLA. And this is where Enforcement Directorate, it has invoked vicarious liability. And what is this vicarious liability? Where you are held responsible for the act of others. Maybe this policy was started by the excise minister. Maybe this policy was started by the finance minister. So you were not directly involved. Who are you? You are Aam Aadmi Party. But since this money, the proceeds of crime, was used by this political party to contest elections in Goa, AAP can be made as an accused under the provisions of Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And this is what Enforcement Directorate has told the court. That's what we call vicarious liability. Someone else has done something, but you will be held accountable for that. Similarly, Mr. Kejriwal, against him also this vicarious liability was invoked because you were the Delhi Chief Minister under whom this policy was conceptualized. Maybe you did not take this money to yourself, but through you this policy was conceptualized. And since you are the convener of Aam Aadmi Party as well, you are the head of this political party which used this money to contest Goa elections, vicarious liability for you as well. You are accused in this case and ultimately you were arrested. Mr. Kejriwal was summoned by Enforcement Directorate for 8 to 9 times, but he did not appear. And ultimately what ED did, ED arrested. And now the matter went to the court. And the Supreme Court granted interim bail to Mr. Kejriwal. Why? Because this is not an ordinary time. This is an election season. And who are you, Mr. Kejriwal? According to the court, you are a Delhi Chief Minister with no criminal past, and at the same time you are the head of a national party, of a national political party. And there is no reason why we would believe that you may run away from this country. So since this is an election season, since you are leader of a political party, a national political party, a chief minister with no criminal past, we also do not assume that you can run away from this country. We are releasing you on interim bail only during this period so that you can campaign in the elections. So now a different class of people has been created by the Supreme Court. Politicians, no matter what the accusation against them is, corruption, murder, rape, whatever. But since it is an election season, maybe during the election season you will be released on bail so that you can campaign for the elections. Once the campaigning is over, you have to go back to the jail. And now Mr. Hemant Soren, who was the Chief Minister of Jharkhand, who resigned before he was arrested by the ED, he is also asking for the same. Release me on bail so that I can campaign for the elections. Whether this is good, bad or ugly, let's understand this dimension. Because the Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, says people have started raising doubts about the Supreme Court in a sense because a special treatment is given to politicians who are accused of crimes and they are released on interim bail just to campaign in the elections. Is this good, bad or ugly? And listen to me carefully. There used to be something called Section 8, Clause 4 of the Representation of the People Act 1951. It created a special class called a legislator. I don't want to teach you the basics of polity, but you would know under Article 14, class legislation is prohibited. It talks about equal protection of the laws. Clear? If I am a normal individual and I have to contest election, but if I have been convicted by a court of law and I have been sentenced to jail, let's say for 2 years or more, can I contest elections? I cannot, because I am disqualified from contesting elections. And once I am released from jail, for 6 years after my release, I cannot even contest the election. That's the disqualification period. This is for whom? For an Aam Aadmi, for a normal individual. But Section 8 Clause 4 created a separate class as a legislator. If you are a sitting legislator, MP, MLA, MLC, and you have been convicted by a court of law, for which you have been given 2 years or more imprisonment, you will not be disqualified. Instead, within 3 months, you have to appeal to a higher court. If High Court also says you are guilty and you are sentenced to 2 years or more in jail, even then you will not be disqualified. You have to approach the Supreme Court. Only when Supreme Court says you are guilty and you are sentenced to 2 years or more in jail, then you can be disqualified. That means a common man, Aam Aadmi, if you are guilty of a crime for which you have been sentenced to 2 years or more in jail, you cannot contest election. But if you are a legislator, and as a legislator you have committed the same crime, you will not be disqualified. You can keep on contesting elections after elections, elections after elections, according to Section 8 Clause 4 of the Representation of the People Act 1951. Matter went to the court. Lily Thomas versus Union of India 2013. And Supreme Court said this Section 8 Clause 4 is unconstitutional. Why? Because you are creating different classes of people. Legislator as a separate class, Aam Aadmi as a separate class. If Supreme Court said this in 2013 in Lily Thomas versus Union of India, the Supreme Court created a same class in Mr. Kejriwal's case. This will not apply to an individual who wants to contest elections but is a businessman, is a normal citizen of this country. If you are in jail, but as an accused, not as a convict, you can contest election, but you will not be allowed to campaign in the elections. But for a sitting chief minister, a different class has been created by the Supreme Court, and that raises questions about whether the court is creating a special class of people as a legislator, which the same Supreme Court said is not possible in 2013. But at the same time, elections should be free and fair. Election is the lifeblood of a democracy. And in this election, there should be a level playing field. What if the government of the day, just to prevent the opposition leaders from campaigning, reaching out to the voters, will start arresting them? Will there be a level playing field? And that is what Supreme Court realized by granting interim bail to the Delhi Chief Minister. So there are two ways of looking at it. One way, you can criticize the Supreme Court for creating a special class of people known as legislators, known as chief ministers, who can be released on interim bail just because they have to campaign in the elections, which would prima facie violate your own judgment in 2013. But at the same time, you can applaud the Supreme Court for recognizing the need for a free and fair election, for a level playing field in elections, and preventing the executive's onslaught on the opposition leaders. Depends upon which way you look at it. Both arguments I have presented before you. Crime and time, election time, incarceration, arrest adversely affects the democratic spirit according to the Hindu editorial. Clear? Let's look at something else. Social media's impact on Indian politics, written by Yamini Iyer, who till recently was the head of Center for Policy and Research, and Mr. Nilanjan Sarkar, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Policy and Research, which is a highly regarded think tank in Delhi. Let's try and understand what this column is saying. According to the column, the opening lines are, if Congress will win this election, it would be because of Dhruv Rathi, a YouTuber, a YouTube influencer, whose video is India a dictatorship, is India becoming a dictatorship, has already garnered more than 25 million views. So if Congress wins the election, it will be because of Dhruv Rathi, according to the opening lines of this article. But we don't have to focus on that. We have to look at something else. Couple of days ago, I was watching Doordarshan Archives. It's a YouTube channel as well. Maybe once you have time, you can go through those videos. One particular video which was moderated by Nalini Singh, a senior journalist. It was after the elections. There was a debate attended by Mr. Vajpayee, Mr. Rajesh Pilot, Mr. Ramvilas Paswan, Shekhar Gupta as a journalist. And there was free flow of ideas, debate going on. Nobody interrupted anybody. Everybody has had the time to present his or her point of view. Those kind of debates are rare now. Or we can say those kind of quality debates have now become extinct. That was the time of the Doordarshan. Then came the liberalization, privatization, globalization, where the economy opened up, where FDI in media also started. And this is where we saw the mushrooming of private news channels. Even then, we used to witness quality debates. For example, on NDTV, there used to be debates every Saturday and Sunday. Every Saturday there was a debate moderated by Vikram Chandra, known as The Big Fight. Every Sunday at 8 o'clock, there used to be a debate moderated by journalist Barkha Dutt, known as We the People. Quality debates. What I'm trying to say is that Monday to Friday, these news channels would broadcast only news. Debates, if at all, would be broadcast on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. This changed when Mr. Arnab Goswami joined Times Now. So the entire media we can categorize into two broad phases, pre-Arnab and post-Arnab. And this is where he started debates every day, every evening, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock onwards, with his famous The Nation Wants to Know. But people loved him. There was a time when on December 16, 2012, there was a gang rape of Nirbhaya in a moving bus in Delhi. And then there was a series of protests in Delhi. And then one Congress politician, who was the son of the former president of India, he said, who are these people who are protesting? These are dented, painted women. So labeling the protesters as dented, painted, he was grilled by Arnab Goswami and people loved him. Why? Because here is somebody who has now become voice of the voiceless, who is grilling the politicians every 9 o'clock, every day 9 o'clock, asking important questions which others, which Doordarshan, which is the state media, could not have dared to ask. But then over a period of time, this entire media changed and now all we have are television debates. And these television debates, according to critics, are also one-sided, favoring the ruling party. And when the ruling party is favored by these TV debates by majority of the electronic media, what it leaves then? This is what led to the rise of YouTube or influencers, or what we call the rise of the social media. So if there is an essay or if there is a mains question asked on the rise of the social media, on the rise of the influencers, you can cite these examples. The Doordarshan, then the liberalization era, then pre-Arnab, post-Arnab. And one reason for the increase in the reach of social media, yes, is the cheap data rates that we have in India, the penetration of the smartphones in India. That's also the reason. But the bigger reason is that this traditional media, electronic media, what it has done, it has abdicated from its responsibility of becoming voice of the voiceless. And if people by and large view this traditional media, print media still commands a lot of respect acceptability, credibility amongst the people, but it's this mass electronic media which has lost its credibility. And when it has lost its credibility, this is where people have now jumped to YouTube, where Ravish Kumar is watched, where Dhruv Rathi is watched, where others are watched, both from right wing, left wing, and the centrist as well. Because the traditional media has failed, has abdicated from its responsibility to become the voice of the voiceless. It is viewed as biased. And with the cheap data rates, with the cheap smartphones, mushrooming of the smartphones, we see the rise of the YouTube and influencers. So from this particular column, maybe you should not look at who is winning or who is losing. But we have to look at the rise of the social media and its impact on Indian politics. That is why political parties have now spent money, have now earmarked budget for social media influencers. They're paying them so that they can become their voice, because they are viewed as independent, normally independent, or we can say lesser biased as compared to the traditional electronic media. Clear? That's something that you need to understand from this topic. Let's look at focus prelims, where we will pick topics relevant for their prelims. Over 300 people have become Indian citizens under the Citizenship Amendment Act. If you have already understood CAA and the CAA rules, don't watch this lecture further, skip this portion. But if you're somebody who is new to this channel, who is unaware of what this law is, what are these rules, I'll try and make it simpler for you in the next 5 minutes. The year was 2019 when Citizenship Amendment Act was passed by the Indian Parliament. According to Indian laws, illegal migrants are not eligible to become the citizens. I'll repeat, illegal migrants are not eligible for Indian citizenship. Never. But CAA 2019, what it says, if you are from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh, and if you belong to 6 religious minorities, Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains, Parsis, and if you have come to India on or before December 31, 2014, you are not deemed as a legal migrant. When you are not deemed as a legal migrant, which means you are eligible for citizenship. And you are eligible for citizenship through a route known as naturalization. Clear? Now, to implement this law, we need rules. After a long delay of more than 4 years, finally this year in March, the rules were notified by the central government to implement Citizenship Amendment Act. What are these rules basically for? How do we prove through documentation that you are from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh? So how do we prove your origin? And the government said any identity document. Any identity document which you can show to us, which proves that you are a citizen or you have been the citizen of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, any such document is okay. Any document which proves that your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents, they were the citizens of these countries, any such document which you can bring will convince us that you are from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh. So any document, which means previously there used to be a requirement. If you are not a citizen of India and you want to become the citizen of India, you have to show as proof that you are a citizen of another country, the passport of that country, the visa that India has given you. But now these rules say you don't need passport of these countries, you don't need visa from India as well. Any document which can convince us that you are from these 3 countries or your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents were the citizens of these countries, we will accept those documents and we will be convinced that your origin is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh. What is the proof of religion, that you are from Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, any document. That means these documents can also prove to us that you are from these communities, or you can get any document, maybe a document by any priest. Any priest in India, if this priest can certify that you belong to Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, it can convince us that you belong to these religions. Give us those documents and we will grant you citizenship. How can you prove entry into India? What is the proof? The government said any document, which can be a census slip, which can be Aadhaar, because Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship. Aadhaar is a proof of identity. Even foreigners are eligible for Aadhaar. Maybe PAN, maybe ration slip. Any document which you can show to us, school leaving certificate for example, which can tell us that you have entered India before 31st December, on or before 31st December 2014, we will grant you citizenship. Previously, there was a requirement that if you are applying for Indian citizenship through naturalization, you also need a certificate. Certificate from a school that you are well versed in any Indian language. Because one requirement is that if you want to become the citizen of India through naturalization, one such condition is that you should be well informed or you should be well versed in any Indian language mentioned under Schedule 8 of the Constitution. For that, you had to submit school certificate, where one of the subjects that you have been taught in the school, which you have cleared in the school, is a language mentioned in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. Now the government has said, you can self-declare that I can speak in this language mentioned in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. So you don't need to furnish this certificate by the school, where the certificate would have shown that you have studied this language which is mentioned in the 8th schedule. Self-declaration by yourself that you can speak in this language is more than enough, and we will give you the citizenship. And that is how over 300 people have now for the first time become eligible, become citizens of India through this route of CAA. Is that clear? Let's look at another article. AP records 81.86 voter turnout, which is the highest so far in this election. But the focus is on postal ballots, essential service, home votes. 1.2% of these votes have been polled through postal ballot. And for that, you need to understand a concept called absentee voters. Rule 27 capital A of the Election Conduct Rules 1961, it talks about absentee voters. And who are these absentee voters? Those who are eligible to vote through postal ballot. And who are these people who vote through postal ballot? If you are the service voters, for example, you are in the army. If you are, for example, somebody who is in essential services, somebody who is affected by COVID, if you are a senior citizen, all these are service vote. All these are absentee voters. But listen to me carefully. The category of essential service, that means who are part of the essential service, who will become absentee voters, who will then become entitled to vote through postal ballot. This category will be decided by the Election Commission of India in consultation with the central government. So ECI and the central government will consult each other and specify who are part of the essential services. Then they should be entitled for voting through postal ballot. In Bihar elections in 2020, in Karnataka Legislative Assembly elections also, elderly were for the first time given an option of voting from home. in Bihar elections, legislative assembly elections, and Karnataka legislative assembly elections as well. For the first time, at the Lok Sabha level, we have those who are 85 years or above, those persons who are suffering with disability, 40% benchmark disability, they are given the option of voting from home. But how will they be given an option of voting from home? Today, election notification is issued. If election notification is issued today, within 5 days, these voters who are above the age of 85, who are with 40% benchmark disability, they will have to fill a form. Form is known as Form 12D, basically telling the returning officer that we need a facility of voting from home because we can't visit the polling station. And then poll officials, security officials as well, they will visit the home of these voters, and this entire process will be videographed, because ultimately you have to ensure transparency. And these voters will be notified by the poll authorities through SMS as well, that we are coming to your place at this particular date, at this particular time, so be ready. And then in presence of the poll officials, security officials, the entire process will be videographed for transparency. These voters will vote at home, because the Election Commission of India has a motto. And what is the motto? To leave no voter behind. So that no voter is left behind. That's something that you need to understand from this absentee voters. But now let's focus on means. How? Sometimes, let's say there is a question asked on man-animal conflict. You know everything about man-animal conflict, but then you should also pepper your answers with some current affairs topics, current affairs developments, maybe a line here and there which will lend weight to your answer. One such tidbit is this: Kadars. These are scheduled tribes. They predominantly reside in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, and in Karnataka as well. And we have almost always understood that these Kadars, they live in peace. With wild animals. So traditionally, they were living in harmony with the wild animals. For example, elephants. But now what we have seen, which has shocked environmentalists as well, which have shocked observers as well, a Kadar tribesman in Tamil Nadu, a tiger reserve in Tamil Nadu, he died in an elephant attack. And this is despite the fact that Kadars are known to coexist with wild elephants for ages. So in this man-animal conflict, if a question is asked, if you can write this statement as well, that the conflict has reached to such a level that yes, the habitat has been degraded of elephants, their corridors have been infiltrated into, there is this increasing man and animal conflict. But at the same time, it has led to such a proportion that Kadars, who are aboriginals, the tribesmen living in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, who are known for ages to have lived in harmony with the wild elephants. A tribesman from the Kadar tribe was also killed by the wild elephants. That is to such level this man-animal conflict has reached. So this tidbit, this one statement here and there will lend a lot of weight to your answers. So please incorporate it whenever such a question is asked. And towards the end, let's look at 2 practice questions for mains. The UAPA dilutes the distinction between political dissent and criminal activity by criminalizing dissident voices and acts. Critically analyze. So you will have to give arguments both in favor of UAPA, against UAPA as well, because we are asking you to critically analyze. The UAPA of 1967, which has been amended multiple times as recent as 2019, penalizes unlawful acts and terrorist acts and has the provision of banning unlawful organizations and terrorist organizations. The amendments in 2019 have come under scrutiny from human rights organizations for their potential for abuse. For example, even an individual can be declared as a terrorist. But normally you should be declared as a terrorist by the courts of law. Here the central government, if it believes that you have indulged in terrorist acts, you will be declared as a terrorist. If it believes. Then there are safeguards as well. For example, you can challenge this designation before the central government. The same central government which designated you as a terrorist, you can challenge it before the central government. But if it rejects it, then there will be a committee. A committee will be headed by the sitting or retired judge of the High Court. There will be 3 other members as well. And then this committee will decide whether you are rightly designated as a terrorist or an unlawful organization or not. So there are procedural safeguards in the law as well, which prevent the misuse of this law. But then, because of 2019 amendments, the law says those who propagate the ideology of terrorism are also coming under the ambit of this law. And this term is so vague, so wide, that even an honest criticism of the government, even a dissenting act against the government can be viewed as an unlawful activity for which this law can be misused. Evaluate the steps taken by the Election Commission of India to increase voter turnouts and purifying the electoral rolls. So 2 aspects here. What are the steps taken by the Election Commission of India to increase voter turnout? This is where you can talk about sweep, systematic voters, education, participation, the scheme which was launched by Election Commission of India from 2010. Although this process started in 2009, but since 2010, the Election Commission of India is using this program sweep to increase the voter participation, to purify the electoral rolls as well, so that those who are dead, they are removed from the electoral rolls. Those voters who have shifted to another constituency, those are to be removed. If the entries are duplicate, if your same person is mentioned multiple times, those duplicate entries are to be removed. Various steps have been taken by the Election Commission of India to purify electoral rolls or to increase voter turnout, bringing in celebrities to, you see the hoardings of Sachin Tendulkar and other celebrities who are asking you to vote in the elections. All that is done by the Election Commission of India to increase the voter turnout and purify the electoral rolls. That is it with our newspaper analysis for today. I know dominated by the polity related news, but such is the nature of newspaper today. It was all dominated by polity. If you have liked the session, do let me know in the comment section, and do not forget to press the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. I'll see you tomorrow 10 o'clock in the morning with another edition of the Hindu newspaper analysis. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.